Hi, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Code Vein 2. If you know anything about me, you might know that I love Code Vein 1. Code Vein 1 is one of my favorite games of all time. It had tight level design, cool combat, and nice and easy to follow story that has depth to it. It had everything that I really enjoy in a game. And Code Vein 2 did away with the story and the tight level design, also the interesting world and the art style, and traded it for something that is a lot more generic. And in my opinion, it's not been a worthwhile trade. And we'll be talking about it today. But without further ado, let's talk about Code Vein 2. So what is Code Vein 2 actually? Well, for one, Code Vein 2 is an ambitious open world Souls-like. It has, however, forgotten what it meant to be a good open world. You see, a game like Elden Ring is the perfect example of an open world Souls game. It is pretty hard, it has really interesting boss fights, and while yes, we can argue that the caves and all the side dungeons in Elden Ring are kinda copy-pasted, which they also are in Code Vein 2, at least there are a little bit of variation. In Code Vein 2, mostly all the dungeons have the same interior design, period. There are about 2 or 3 different versions of that, but it is just the same thing on repeat. The bosses in there, mostly all of them are also just copy-pasted normal enemies. And on top of that, they don't really give you any big reward. Whereas in Elden Ring, what made a dungeon interesting to explore was the fact that when you got to the bottom of that motherfucking dungeon, you could be sure that you'll be leaving with some weird or cool item. In Code Vein, though, there's a chance that they'll just give you some ability that you can slap on your weapon that you'll likely forget about. It is just not nearly as interesting at all. On top of that, there aren't a lot of them. There are a few, there are quite a few as well, but there aren't as many as there is in something like, again, Elden Ring, which is the game that you should compare this to. And on top of that, in my opinion, the open world itself just feels empty and devoid of anything. And while we could talk about how that might be kind of the point, I feel like there is a point in here because it is supposed to be post-apocalyptic. And the fact that it doesn't feel like there is anything might be something that the developers wanted. However, I feel like what they ended up with instead is just kind of having a boring open world. It doesn't have any interesting colors, there isn't a lot of interesting structures for you to explore. The areas themselves are kind of boring, and that counts for all of them, mind you. I will say though, weirdly enough, the funniest one to explore, the one that I enjoyed the most, was Corroded Scar, which is the poisoned swamp in this game. I just don't know. Not a lot of Code Vein 2 really appealed to anything that I enjoyed. In terms of the story though, the things that Code Vein 1 did well was that it had a coherent story that was interesting enough to guide you along. Honestly, it was even quite well written. I loved the character arcs, I loved all of it. It was easy to follow, yet not so easy that it became a filler. And Code Vein 2 took maybe the wrong lesson from that, as the story is one of the most convoluted I have had to play through so far in my life. It falls into the trap of time travel, as in Code Vein 2 you have to prevent the end of the world. And to do that, you must travel back in time to kill a subset of heroes, or make sure that the thing that they did didn't happen, so they would end up in another state in reality. And when you do that, then you end up finding them in like the current timeline, killing them, preventing the end of the world, or so you think. Because as you're nearing the end of the game, which full spoiler alert here for the record, it turns out that all these revenants that you have been killing, well, they are actually kind of charging the end of the world. The pure fact of existing as a revenant, as what you are in the game, as these half vampires with blood coats and all of that, charges the end of the world. They have this energy in them that does that. So technically the only way to save the world is through destroying all revenants. However, there might be another solution, and that is sort of what the good ending goes after. But to get to that point, you have to travel back and forth from different timelines constantly. It is all a little bit too convoluted to really understand. And in my opinion, the character writing maybe stands out more in Code Vein 2 than it did in Code Vein 1, but it still teeters on that little bit too archetypical anime. In my opinion, I just don't quite enjoy it. Characters like Jose manages to have super interesting stories that are undercut by their character design, because they are meant to be the hot love interest that is also just a lolly. I don't know, for me it's just a little strange, just a little bit. And I really dislike those elements. I dislike the fact that we have to weave these sort of elements into Code Vein 2. It's not that love can't exist in a game. It's just that I dislike the way that it is woven into it. Where this lolly girl turns out to also be your lover, that turns out to also be the hero, that turns out to also... Like, it feels like there's an idea here, but it's just poorly executed. And I feel like it's as simple as that with most of the characters there. A good example of a character, in my opinion, that is this kind of poorly executed idea is a character called Holly. Holly can heal you, and her entire bloodline's thing is that they heal people, which then contains a sickness that will eventually kill them. And that on its face sounds pretty interesting. How do we deal with the sickness and so on? And her character arc, for the most part, ends up being interesting until the very end. Because you see, for some reason, Holly has got this idea into her head that her dad was a piece of shit. He, like, sold their disabled mom. He wouldn't care at all about his daughter, and then when you go back through the flashbacks to her like time with her dad, it turns out the guy was completely normal. It is never explained why she forgot that. Why she just all of a sudden forgot why her dad was like just a loving father. Like, it makes no sense, honestly, in my opinion. Like, did she just forget? Am I to assume that this is a side effect of the curse? I don't quite get it. I really don't. And maybe it's just a me thing, but I genuinely dislike her entire storyline, especially after that. Before that, she was interesting enough to keep going and like kept me interested, partially because of the fact that she had this like dynamic with the curse killing her when she healed people and so on. Like, that is interesting enough. But then you have the entire subplot with the father. And then you throw on to heal people. She has to use the hot springs, where she'll like get in it with you, like borderline naked in the hot tub with you. And like, I don't know, man. It's just, in my opinion, a little bit too blatant with the fan service. But that is just a me thing. On top of that, if you then complete her side quest, which I highly recommend you do if you're playing the game, it unlocks extra slots for your jail, which is your special ability, which we'll talk more about when we get to combat. But it unlocks extra slot for that so you can have more stats. But her side quest also shows that she attempted to become a content creator but was embarrassed by it. Which, I didn't even know they had phones in this universe. What are you talking about? Like, holy moly. And like, there's a lot of these ideas that are just kind of haphazardly thrown in there doing either side quests or sometimes main quests that are just a little bit too strange. That being said, there are a few good things about Code Vein 2. One of the things that I really enjoy is a new weapon archetype. So let's start to talk a little bit about combat. Code Vein 2 did a cardinal sin, in my opinion. An awful thing. I think it should have never been done. And that is, they made the greatsword small. They made a tiny greatsword. It's supposed to be a greatsword, not a tiny sword. Come on now. And initially I disliked the combat, I'll be completely honest. The fact that they butchered my favorite archetype, what is this? What are you talking about? Why would you do this? Was my sort of reaction. However, as I played the game, I decided to try out a new weapon archetype called the Rune Blades. And since then, I have become a Rune Blade lover. They should be in everything. Rune Blades are essentially two floating swords you get behind you that you can swing while doing different martial arts moves. And if that doesn't sound cool, I don't know what to tell you. That is the coolest thing, like, of all time. You're doing like martial arts moves, and as you're doing it, the blades are flung from side to side, and you do your heavy charged up attack, and it reaches up into the air and reaches like areas that you can't normally reach. And on top of that, they have these special attacks where you can send them out, and then they'll attack the enemy for you. However, that is also where about my good and enjoyment part of it ends. I love the Rune Blade, but the combat itself, in my opinion, can feel a rather bit weird at times. Partially, a lot of that has to do with the fact that while the boss fights are pretty good, fighting the enemies just ends up being boring because of their overuse. And I blame a lot of that on the open world. You see, in the open world, a lot of the bosses that you'll find in the different dungeons are just copy-pasted normal enemies with nothing unique about them. And I find it really boring, I think, just like as an overall thing. It's just not that enjoyable. And quite frankly, once you've fought the first 50 soldiers, then the next 50 are just the same. And even when they start to get different skins, sometimes you'll find like a higher ranked normal soldier by the end they're complete skeletons. They also feel pretty samey. It's a bit of a shame, because one of the things that I felt like Code Vein 1 did pretty well was enemy variety. There was a lot of different shit that you were killing, and yeah, sometimes there was the occasional just copy-paste different color scheme on that shit, but this time they didn't even bother to put a different color scheme on the enemy. I don't know, for me it just isn't it. And I think on top of that, the camera angle that hasn't been improved, like the camera at all, like it hasn't been improved from Code Vein 1 at all, just kinda sucks, man. It's just bad for some of these fights, just straight up. And that's not to say that they're particularly hard. I still don't think this is a like super hardcore Souls game. Only the biggest gamers of the gamers can fight these bosses. Yeah, there are some bosses that are harder than others, and some of these I actually think it's okay to say are just poorly designed. As an example, in my opinion, the biggest design flaw on a boss is one that you meet fairly early on in Jose's storyline, or Jose's, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, storyline, which is this half-sized big woman. Basically, they cut her off at like her legs, and then she's just big, and she has some different tentacles or something hanging off her. And the thing that I dislike about this boss fight is not the boss itself, it's a cool design. What they've done is super unique. I've never quite seen anything like it, and I love that. However, that being said, behind her, which she moves a lot, including going behind her, like one of her moves is jumping back, she leaves this pool of acid. And if you aren't using a bayonet, you kinda will eventually have to step into it. Or the character might automatically step in it as you are attacking. Maybe this is me complaining about something that could just be a huge skill issue. And I don't mind admitting that that could easily be it. I am not a good player. But I don't know. I really dislike that. I really dislike that. And there are few examples of this throughout the game. They're mostly all pretty solid. But examples like that one, and then there is one that you'll meet in some optional side dungeons that are also repeated a lot, including in the main story if you're going for the true ending, is this giant guy that has like tentacles, and then he has a mace that he'll swing with, which he can create these wind projectiles that can hit you, and he'll fling up rocks and whatnot. And that's all fine and dandy. I don't mind that at all. What I mind is the fact that the only way to really deal a proper amount of damage to him is to hit his tentacles. However, he is big, so for the most part, you will struggle with hitting them, which I'm just gotta be the one to say it, is really goddamn annoying. Like, that is really frustrating, because most of the time you just can't hit them, which means that the entire boss fight is you waiting for 1 or 2 attacks, while just running around him, just waiting for the 1-2 attacks that you can punish, and then you punish those and then you move on. And again, there might be better ways of doing it. As an example, if you have a bayonet, you can shoot them, which I imagine makes things a whole lot easier. But if you're like me, who used the rune blades through basically everything, then you're still stuck in this hard place where it's like, I can't damage him for the most part. He's just really fucking annoying. I don't understand why they decided to make a boss like that. Like, on one hand, I don't mind the fact that they have weak spots, but then let it be accessible if I'm decent. At least seemingly decent. Because I think the only way you can really damage him for at least a few of the attacks is to jump through iframes. Now, again, could I be wrong? Yes. Could it be a massive skill issue? Yes. But I personally really dislike this. Now, lastly for combat, I do want to say, overall, most of the enemies in Code Vein 2 are completely fine. There's a lot of times where I genuinely think the game is unfair. I think most of the boss fights are actually pretty good even. I love the enemy design, I love the character design when they change it up. It's so interesting. Sometimes they'll throw these amalgamations together, and by god, they are cool. One of my favorite is one of the final bosses of the game, and I'll show you a little bit from him without spoiling too much of the actual story, although be aware there are gonna be fight spoilers here. But he is really cool. This is the amalgamation that kind of looks like a dragon's, but it has all of these different hands of masks that are like carrying different masks that each symbolize something else from the game's story and shit. It's cool. Come on now. That is dope as shit. However, unfortunately, to get to those interesting bosses, sometimes you'll have to go through the bad ones. And I don't know, to me it's just a little bit too much of a mess. Stats and all that stuff work very similar to Code Vein 1, which is to say that they're based off your block code, which you unlock through interacting with different characters and maxing out your block codes. It is an interesting enough system and it keeps me engaged. I actually really enjoy the system as it allows you to swap around fairly quickly without being punished for it. There isn't like this stat screen that you have to consider, anything like that. You don't have to reset your stats. You can just equip one block code and swap to the other one. I really enjoy that, and that needs to get some praise because it's a cool and unique way to do stats that I don't see a lot of games do, and I really enjoy it. Now, here at the end, I do want to say that there are times in Code Vein 2 where the story and the characters and the world genuinely hits its own stride. Like, there are times where everything comes together and creates some genuinely special and beautiful moments. For me, one of my favorites is during the end of Josie's questline, where she says, "When you've lived as long as I have, it can be easy to forget. You forget how beautiful things are in their time. How fleeting each moment can be. Before I met you, my past was a burden, and my power a curse. But somehow, everything you touched turned to hope." Now, you can say whatever you want about the game, but those two lines are genuinely beautiful. Like, everything comes together here. This is after you have completed all of the other things leading up to the end of Jose's storyline, and they just hit it home so fucking well. It is beautiful. It is such a good moment. And if the game only had more of this and less of the weird and convoluted storytelling, I'd be all for it. I'll between men, we just sit here and talk for a little bit. You know, I don't mind admitting it. I shed a manly tear at this moment. You know, it is beautiful, like genuinely beautiful when you get to the end of the storyline and you've gone through all of this with this character, and then these lines are like written as you have to leave them, knowing that their end will be at the edge of your blade. It is, in my opinion, genuinely good. Like, genuinely fantastic even. However, you're immediately put back into the rest of the game once you start to play it again. And it is, of course, not the only moment. There are other ones. I really like one of the endings where your character ends up sacrificing himself, as it just feels so Code Vein down to its essence. However, unfortunately, I can't end it on this positive note, because there are elements of Code Vein 1 that they just outright removed in Code Vein 2, such as the multiplayer is completely gone. Character ranks through gifting still exist, but they've been made a little bit weirder. Now you have to give a bunch of like items before you can buy a character's weapon, and I don't know, like I said before, not really into it a lot. I feel like the character bond system in this game just kind of sucks. Like, to give you an idea, to get the irreplaceable achievement, I ended up spending the better part of 2 hours just gifting one character gifts and then immediately going out and slaying creatures with them. And that was not as much because I wanted the achievement, more just because I wanted the max rank just to see if anything would happen. But like, it was cool, you know, I don't mind it. But yeah, in general, not the greatest game. I feel like if you're a big fan of Code Vein, then you've probably already purchased it, and then there's no point in me telling you not to. However, I do think this game would have gone over better if it hadn't been put in the Code Vein name. Things like having a open world game could work, but it needs to be a little bit smoother than this. On top of the performance issues at launch that I think some people are still experiencing, and in my opinion, the completely lackluster mount. Like, the motorcycle looks cool, it can glide and whatnot, but it drives really slowly. It doesn't feel like I'm on a mount. It's weird. I don't know. Also, if you don't like the perspective that you're looking at the motorcycle in when you're driving, then Swear on a PlayStation controller can allow you to swap it around. Just letting you know in case you're struggling with it like I was for a while. Overall though, Code Vein 2 in my opinion is a bit of a disappointment. I don't quite enjoy it. I don't quite see Code Vein in this. I hope for a third game that they go back to the roots a little bit more, back to Code Vein 1. I really hope so. Tight level design, and if they're doing an open world, then you can do it smaller. It's okay. We don't need a trillion useless dungeons. A few big ones that are interesting are much better. Or alternatively, a lot of small ones that are also interesting, but I think that's more work. Regardless, I'm not gonna sit here and armchair deaf you too much more. For now, I just want to wish you a very good rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. And if you made it all the way here, then I genuinely appreciate it. You allowed me to talk your ear off about a game that you probably don't really care about. And honestly, for that reason alone, I just need to say thank you. If you enjoy what you saw, please like, comment, subscribe, the YouTube stuff, the good old stuff, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.